Still an everyday struggle trying to get fed. Spot at the table for my daily bread. Wonder why we thuggin' though we misled. Started dog when we trying to break that daily bread. You can't feel the hunger through without air. Cover how we suffer for the daily bread. Sometimes that pressure make me feel like I'ma lose my head. To make sure my young feet get that daily bread. Waking up to the traffic in the sunrise. Just another day trying to strategize. Mama running late for work, thinking strike two. Third job this year, cause it's nothing new. Trying to stay in school, trying to learn something. It's hard to get your mind right when your ribs touch. Teacher think I'm mugging, that's just hunger pains. Being cinematic, but it's Hunger Games. Try to play it off, mute the suffering. But my stomach break the silence when it's rumbling. So it's quarter cakes, chips, and ramens. Hunger is something 1 in 5 shorties got in common. Hit up corner stores, no fresh markets around. Sustain it from the shelf, no food straight from the ground. Multiply that times all the hoods in my town. We playing in the field, but nobody working the ground. Still an everyday struggle trying to get fed. Need a spot at the table for my daily bread. Wonder why we thuggin' though we misled. Stop the dog when we trying to break that daily bread. You can't feel the hunger through an op-ed. Cover how we suffer for the daily bread. Sometimes the pressure make me feel like I'ma lose my head. To make sure my seeds get their daily bread.
Some scrape their bread up from the crumbs left on the table. Sipping pot liquor to ease that rumbling coming from behind their navel. You making that bread when you need your own dough. And the sharpest knife in the drawer can get a slice off that loaf. It's the life that I chose, but it's life it chose me. You see, my daddy was a soldier and my mama a G. I'm talking integrity, legacy, how to march when I step. If granny cooked it, all you heard was to nothing left. Heard the scrape on the plate, but if you don't work, you don't eat. You gotta earn your own keep. What a man sows is what a man reaps. Daddy took his machete, then he handed to me and said, keep swinging and chopping until the way I can see. Adorn the armor of God when I step on the street, knowing the Lord protected me from my head to my feet. When Daddy took his old machete, then he handed to me and said, keep swinging and chopping until the way I can see my daily bread.
Still an everyday struggle trying to get fed. Need a spot at the table for my daily bread. Wonder why we thuggin' though we misled. It's doggy dog when we trying to break the daily bread. You can't feel the hunger through an op-ed. We gon' cover how we suffer for the daily bread. Sometimes that pressure make me feel like I'ma lose my head. To make sure my young seeds get their daily bread.
B1AGers, what's going on? Welcome back again. We got a great show for you. We also have a special guest today, Mr. Don Cordray. He's going to join us today. But today, as you can see by the title, B1AG, is the media tricking us out of our birthright. We're going to take a real critical look at the media and its role and how we perceive things that are going on around us, and also how the media is steering us into the way we think about ourselves and the situations we find ourselves in. Farmer Brown, this daily bread today is very important, because, me and you, we've had media literacy training, you know what I'm saying? So we understand how media works. However, the general person out in society, they just consume media and don't really pay attention to the intentions behind media and how it really works. So today, we really want to help the people to understand how much the media affects the way we see each other and the way we see this world we live in. So what say you?
First, I just like to say peace to the family. They say you are what you eat. Media is a thing that exists that we consume. What do they say? You can tell a tree by the fruit that it bears. What are the fruits that our community is bearing right now, and what is watering or nurturing the plant that we call the Black family right now? When I think about media, okay, to put it in perspective, say our great-great-grandparents, my mother will tell me stories. They never had TVs. My mother, she was born in the 40s. And so, the technology to them was a radio. So she talked about how her and her sisters, they stand around, they had like a 2-bedroom house down in Mississippi, and they listened to the radio, certain characters, certain radio shows. Then later you had the black and white TVs. And I know some of the elders listening remember it might have been a handful of people in the whole town that might have had a TV, just the black and white ones that might have showed a handful of productions. This is where the concept of soap operas come from, because companies who sold soap, these are lye products. Lye can be derived from a pig, if y'all understand what I'm saying with ag, my B1AGers. But it was simply a means to sell products. For those who like to deep dive into history, when you think about World War II, Germany, and the whole propaganda machine, that's a real thing. There's a reason it's called television programming. And so just a brief history, not to get too deep in it. So the Nazi propaganda was what was used as a means of convincing X amount of Germans that there was a bad guy. There was somebody that we need to attack. There's somebody that doesn't belong here. I can't come to you door to door and say, hey, this is the bad guy, let's get him. And so media, when you think from a war standpoint, has proven to be a very viable tool. As entrepreneurs, we realize when you come up with a good idea that works, it achieves the desired outcome of whatever your endeavor is, whether it's right or wrong. You're not going to throw a good idea away. And so when you think about the 1940s, when propaganda was used to demonize the Jews at that time in Nazi Germany, you got to understand that some of these same families, some of the Nazi scientists were actually brought to North America as prisoners. And I don't think they were just here suffering. These are people giving information. And so not to deal in conjecture or conspiracy theory, but we have to be very conscientious. And I know the B1AG family already understands the importance of visuals. To tie it, I guess, to closer times to how we talk about even the administration that's in now. We think back to the late 1970s, Ronald Reagan's campaign intentionally came up with this concept of the welfare queen. This was a lady called Linda Taylor. And what they used was, this was just a regular woman. As we realize, we got to figure out how to navigate and manipulate certain systems and resources just to make sure we can feed our kids and get to the next day. So there was a lady, Linda Taylor, and her picture in her case was severely fabricated and used as a narrative to paint this concept of welfare queen. Whether we want to say it was nefarious or just, a side effect of politics, her archetype was used to paint a broader picture of Black women in North America as somehow dependent on the system, somehow irresponsible, somehow a blight on the great American society, somehow a liability to economics. Ronald Reagan, I'm just wanting to get in the White House, but I understand to get X amount of more Americans to vote for me, I need to have something that brings us together. We'll go into the 1980s with George Bush Sr. and Willie Horton. This was the criminal that they casted in his election campaign to demonize Black men. And so if you're a white person in rural America, Asian person, Hispanic, Latino, and you're not really around a lot of Black folks, the only representation or only context you'll have is what you've seen through a medium being television, newspaper, radio. As we're talking today, we have social media as well. When we hear these stories about fake news. But this is a serious issue, because when we look at that timeline from the 70s of the welfare queen to the 80s of the thug, the scary thug and Willie Horton, then we get the 94 crime bill. The 94 crime bill didn't come out of anywhere. Just like Nazi propaganda worked, I have to first get you to feel offended and angry at the target group. And so when we here in 2021, we're able to look back at the long-term effects of the 94 crime bill, where hundreds of thousands of us brothers and sisters were locked away. This justified a lot of beatings, a lot of injustice, because either intentional vitriol towards our group or ignorance because of bad media. And so, not to get too deep into what we're going to discuss today, because this is a deep topic when we think about what agriculture means how do we have a codified approach in a world where, you know, there's no such thing as secret media now? Everybody has access to Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and so we can disseminate these messages. And so what happens is, I think there's 4 billion people on planet Earth now that have some form of social media or on the internet. And so out of this 4 billion, if you have 10 million people with different opinions, be they right or wrong, this is going to blur the ability to get a straight, concise message across. I think when we think about the conscious community, there's a lot of great content out here. I'm guilty. I overindulge. If I can say my vice, I overindulge on Black conscious content till it gets to the point where I'm kind of still. Okay, what do? I just heard 100 different things that made sense. And I know we wanted to build up the melanated family, but now what do? So this is the importance of having media. And I think real quick before we introduce our guest today, I just want to give my brief background. So obviously I was a hip hop artist, but I remember back in, it might have been 1990, I was 10 years old. I was going to this church called Citadel. This was in Lexington, Kentucky. And up to this time, all we had was the Herald Leader, Lexington Herald Leader. That's the popular newspaper here. And I remember there was a lady, Miss Sanford. She was friends with my mom at the church. You know, Citadel was a breakaway from another church. That's a whole nother conversation. But I remember it was one Sunday, there was this Black man came into church and he had a newspaper. And I do remember now, you know, it used to be a paper that people had in the churches. You know, I used to be one of the ushers, and so I'd see what were in the seats. And it was a community voice. And so I remember one Sunday, Mr. Cordray, and like I said, I was 10 at the time, came to church to visit with his mother, Miss Sanford. And I remember, you know, I was a precocious kid, and I remember, I think the pastor, Reverend Points, had introduced him as this is the publisher of Community Voice. And at that time, I had a small concept of the world. The only newspapers that existed was Herald Leader. And so now at 10, okay, the other newspaper or media that exists is this Community Voice. And this Black man just walked in this church building, and this is the one who does it. And so I remember I went to Mr. Cordray because I was an artist at the time. I used to draw. And I remember he said, hey, you know, write a comic, you know, and he was just talking to me, engaged me or whatever. And so I went home. I remember I wrote a comic book called High Hopes because I was trying to convince my mom to get me some Jordans. And so, you know, after my begging with my mouth, I wrote this cute little article, or not article, but comic strip. And it was 2 guys trying to figure out how they can get some shoes. And I was trying to urge my mom, and this ties into media. You want to influence people to do an action. My mom didn't get the Jordans, but what that did do was start me on a path of creating content, creating characters. Because I met Mr. Cordray at that I don't believe in coincidence, but because I met him at that moment, I saw not only a Black person, but a Black male who created content that other people read. That changed my concept of the world. I didn't know, you know, what I would decide to get. This was even before hip hop. I didn't know I would get into that as a career field, as my mission, as my weapon, so to speak. But it was just merely seeing somebody whose fingers created this. When we talk about B1AG, we plant seeds. And when we plant seeds, we never know how they'll grow. And so it is an honor for me today to bring on Mr. Don Cordray. He's a notable Kentuckian. If you go to the Notable Kentuckian database, he's one of few. There have been other Black publications, but one of few, especially in the last few decades, that actually created media. And as we realize in this finest hour that we're in right now, communication is everything. And so I would just like to say, welcome, Mr. Don Cordray. And first, if you can just kind of give us a little background, what it is you do, where are you coming from? What's your rank, as Wendell Parrish would say?
All right. Appreciate you having me on today. And I like the show, man. Gives a lot of information. I am, as you say, I was born here in Lexington. Went to an all-Black school, Dunbar. Actually, I went to Russell Elementary, which is all Black. Went to Dunbar, which was all Black. And I was like the second wave of integration in the high school. So, and I went to Hennry Clay, which is now central office up on Main Street. I don't ever remember being bused, so I think I walked to school every day. It was an interesting concept. Around went there in the 9th grade, I think, 9th, 10th grade, passed to the 11th grade, and it was a very interesting time because with integration into the school systems, Black kids pretty much were either conformed or, just to be there, we had to fight. So we fought a lot in high school. And it got to a point where I just started, at 17, I said, well, if I got to fight, I might as well go to in the military and get paid to fight. So went to the Navy, spent 3 years in the Navy, served on the USS Lexington. And I got out of the Navy. I came home for about 6 months, and then trying to figure out what I want to do, because little opportunity still. There's early 70s. So I went to San Marcos, Texas, to Job Corps. Got training as a custodial maintenance field, and worked on a Air Force base for a year and a half in Texas. And then I came home, and I went to school, went to Northern Kentucky University, and commercial art and photography. I'd been interested in photography for a while, because actually my grandmother bought me this little camera called a Brownie. It was just a very, very simple camera. So I went to school for commercial art and photography, and I was probably the only Black student in the photography class. So learned how to do film developing in the dark room and all that. So spent a lot of time in the dark room. From there, I basically came home for a while, and then just kind of went away. Started doing a little traveling. So I came back home probably 8 years later. And at the time, I was kind of collecting newspapers, from Black newspapers from different counties and different states that I've been into. So, it's just been an interesting journey. And when you talk about media, I can remember back when I was, quite a few years ago, when the Lexington Herald, the city of Lexington used to have two newspapers. There's a morning paper and an afternoon paper. There was the Lexington Herald and the Lexington Leader before they combined. And the Lexington Herald was on Short Street, on the backside of what is now the Heritage Museum. That used to be the courthouse. So when they tore that building down, and the Herald bought the building on what is that? Midland. Yeah, they built that building over there, and then they combined the papers, so it was the Lexington Herald. So it was just one daily paper, and it was interesting. Media-wise, that was pretty much what we had, and for the most part, if it wasn't sports related or crime related, there was only like a quarter section of one page called the colored notes, where people got their information. And as years went by, we didn't have a Black radio station. I can remember when Channel 56 came into play. They had a big opening at the hotel out on Newtown. I can't remember what the name of the hotel is now. But it's still, the hotel's still there, but I can't remember what the name was. But they had a big whoopie-doo, announcing Channel 56 at the time. It's been interesting. It's been an interesting journey.
So right now in this social media age, And so, I mean, you have to be under a rock not to be bombarded with literally thousands of headlines throughout the day. And here at B1AG, we try to be very intentional about our focus around Black agriculture and food security. As somebody who does media, you know the value in being able to make sure your consumers are aware of your product or your service. We think about a lot of the narratives going on right now in present time as far as just our representation in agriculture. And I know you and I had discussed a little bit a few days ago, and if you could go in on that. Right now in agriculture, as far as farmers, primary operators, landowners, Black or what we call melanated family represent 1.4% of the 3.5 million farmers around North America. This equates to about 35,000 total around the country. And what happens is if you Google and look for ag publications, any sort of media related to agriculture, in my modest opinion, doing my work, a lot of times it's framed as, you know, we're coming from a place of, hey, you did me wrong. Can you help me? Is there something you can give me? When you see us, that will be those color notes you speak of. But then with everybody else, it's the innovation. This is the ag opportunities. You know, this is the great, beautiful sky. These are the great, beautiful products we have. Once again, you know, it's not, you can't force somebody to value what they're going to put in their publication, especially if they take their time, energy, and resources to invest in it. And so on your end, how important in your experience, and if you could briefly touch on your experience in the Navy, because your experience pretty much represents this same dynamic of Black farmers. You're one in a whole group of other people, and you're there for a reason. We all want to contribute to our society. We all want to be able to take care of those that we're responsible for. We want to get to the next day and be able to pass down wealth. I'm not going to say in a battle situation, but you're literally in the military. How can you tie your military experience to your experience as a person publishing a newspaper in a culture where you're only normally relegated to color notes? How important is media?
Well, it's kind of hard to understand what some people go through. I don't mess with people because I don't know their history. Okay. I have fun with people and I know when to shut it down, but if you don't know a person's history, you just kind of leave them alone. So in the military, like I say, I served on an aircraft carrier, and even before that, when I was in boot camp, that's when we talked about I was the only Black in my boot camp company, and there were like with 76 of us. So the same pattern in the late 60s, like I went in 67, 68. So there was a pattern of what Blacks could do in the military. And it depended on what area of the U.S. you came from and what branch of service you went into. There were still restrictions. The same thing happens with agriculture even today. There are people who have farms, whose farms have been handed down through their family, but because of certain restrictions, they still can't get loans. And the same people that they're going to get or trying to get loans from are the same people who are going to be selling their farms. So the restrictions are still there. The media only provides a certain amount of information to the public. And I'll give an example of that. This stimulus bill that just passed or is still in Congress being debated. People are talking about $1,400, but this small amount that they're going to give to Americans to appease us is nothing compared to the amount of money that's being sent to other countries. We don't know anything about that. If you don't read or find out, they're not going to tell you that. They're just going to tell you what you need to know. So the problem is people don't do research, and they need to do research, which means they need to read. you can't. Social media is good but social media is only good to the point where you only get what people want you to know. There's certain things that I tell people all the time. You know, when it's like when the government supposedly shut down. Who are those people that were still picking our fruits and vegetables? What were they doing? Because, you know, a lot of those people, they're out in the field. A lot of people don't know you should wash your vegetables. I don't care where you get them from, even if you grow them yourself, you still need to wash them. So the people who were picking and packing and, you know, sending out our vegetables and fruits and vegetables, you know, they went to the restroom. They relieved themselves in the fields. Those fruits and vegetables need to be washed once you get them. A lot of people don't understand that, and that's why a lot of people get sick. You know, so social media is good, but only to a point, because it only tells you what they, and I mean they who control social media, they only tell you what they want you to know. So if you don't do research, if you don't read for yourself and talk to other people, like-minded people, you're kind of in the dark, you know. And that's where I think my newspaper, you know, I try to provide some information into topics that people needed to understand and read and do some research. You know, and I couldn't give a whole synopsis of everything, but there was enough information in there. If people wanted more information, they would know where to find it or look for it. And I think that's the big problem. We don't read enough, and that's been instilled in us because, one, they didn't want us to read, our forefathers to read when they were slaves, because they knew if they got information, they wouldn't stay slaves. You know, so it's kind of a pass me down trait. You know, we just need to get information, disseminate information, and start to think for ourselves and discuss things.
One of the things, I don't like to use the word fear, but you know, it's on my radar. So right now, the average farmer in North America is 65 years old. When we're thinking, obviously, you don't have to go to college to get into agriculture, but you know, for people going into agriculture and agricultural fields, out of 39,000 agricultural degrees awarded in in 2018, only a little over 1,100 were what we classify as African Americans. This is 1,100 of us out of a 39,000 field. You know, when you think about your experience in the military, applying that to these narratives, the way that we look at the world. How do we have these conversations when, you know, some people talk about the Willie Lynch letter, whether this person was real or not? There are some very real dynamics. Obviously, there are differences with genders. But when we think about the age difference, I've really I can speak for myself, over the last few years, really had to do a lot of humbling. I remember looking at the Roots movies like, oh, man, if I was in that situation, I would never let this happen. You know, we read these stories in our history books about all of these atrocious things that were going on. And I realized, okay, in the 60s, you lived in the 60s, right? I never saw a picture of you and the things you were going through in the 60s. I saw the same people who were at the freedom fight rallies and the marches, meaning there was a whole part of our society, a whole part of our community that was living, functioning, succeeding, building, that future generations weren't aware of. You know, I'm fortunate. I was at least brought up in a culture where I read and I was always curious. But when you're, you know, from your vantage point, living through what you've lived through, you're, like I said, you weren't a bystander. Regardless of how history narrates you, you created. At a time when there was a need, you filled it. When you look at today, when you look at the basic needs just around our food security and the clear inability, or I would say lack of efficiency, between that generational information transfer, what do you see as the barriers to that? Because some of these young people that might, you know, I ain't gonna say a horrible experience, but I wouldn't want young people going into agriculture necessarily to model my means of getting into agriculture. meaning in, going into debt, waiting. I was 30 years old before I even talked about agriculture. We need students at the age of 10, 13, 14 that at least have a context, then going into 18, 19, able to talk to an elder farmer or an elder business person or an elder who has created something. What do you see as a barrier as this basic conversation of what are we going to do about our food system becomes ever more important? What are the barriers that we need to address from your vantage point to make these key conversation and information transfers happen?
No, I think some of the barriers that we have are basically this. We don't see farming as, or adults who have children don't see farming as a means of producing anything that we know how to produce. Okay? You can, on the smallest level, you could grow tomatoes, in your backyard. You don't need to get soil samplings and things of that nature, but that helps. But I think some of the barriers are that a lot of people don't know how to grow anything. They never have. It's not been something that they were taught. I don't know. There's this. I guess it's a myth that even people who, I don't know, they have to eat, and they think they have to go to the store to get what they need to eat. So they don't know how to grow stuff, and they don't research how to grow stuff. The only thing, and it's interesting because I've been to like Alaska and some of these the Caribbeans, and they grow vegetables, and that's their main staple. But anything else has to be either airlifted in or come by boat. So the majority of their meats come by air or boat. But they understand, and they've made their meals to center around vegetables. So we as American consumers, for the most part, we're meat eaters. So we don't have a farm where we have cows and we can't slaughter our cows. And we don't know how to cut meat up and all that good stuff. I've got a neighbor on the backside of my house who does a deer every year. And hangs him up, slices him open, cuts up his own meat. So, but as Black consumers, we don't understand that concept. We don't know how, So I think the biggest issue is just to find people who know and support them, but we don't support each other, which is a problem. So
once again, what have you noticed? We like to be very open. In B1AG, we all come from the concept we're still learning. There's so many things about this field that, if we're honest with ourselves, we really don't know. And you realize, like you were discussing the other day, regardless of person, smart or stupid, if I've lived longer than you, I have mathematically have more experiences than you. If I live to this point, there's things I know. How can a generation, because I'll be honest, I have an ego. Every day I try to, shape it, cut it down. But it comes a point where in your mind, you're like, okay, they did it wrong, so I can't do it that way. But then from your vantage point, you understand like, hey, youngin, I done lived this, nothing new under the sun. How do we create these conversations? And more specifically, how can we have this conversation through media? Obviously, you understand media in a very different way than I did. I think I was 16 when we first had internet. You lived at least 40 years of your life where there was no such thing as an internet, and you had to deal with real people, with the real product. You had to have real conversations. How do you bridge that communication gap? Because like you said, the importance of eating affects all of us, young and old. And there is an active, I think it goes back to Bart Simpson as far as my generation of young people not seeing elder people, and I don't mean elder like hunched over, but just I've lived longer than you, not seeing them as a viable source of information. I almost feel like we're kind of corralled into feeling like we have to go to institutions, everything else but our own elders who's lived. the best, most impactful professor at one of these predominantly white institutions hasn't had the lived experience of, say, an elder in one of our communities. And so if I'm teaching, I want to help y'all brown students get ahead. And I'm going to tell you life, like you said, you don't like to judge people because, people don't know where you come from. And so in their best attempts, they can't help. And so what can we do to be able to get this information from the people in our community who understand it and know it? Do you feel like younger people, are we kind of coming across arrogant? Are we dangerous? I know if I try to look at things from a farmer's perspective. Okay, these people talking about this ag stuff, but I don't live long enough to see people get lynched for, getting too aggressive or assertive. But at the same time, okay, there's a value in being aggressive and assertive. And so how do we make that balance? And, what do young people, and I guess it's the same question. How do we have this conversation with the elders who sit on this information? But then, there's these little things about the younger generation that's like, I want to help you, but it's a risk to me. It's a liability. How do we mend that, just in your opinion?
Well, it's got to start with parents of young kids, and we have to find a way to get the young kids into programs like Future Farmers of America, things of that nature. I used to work at a hotel, and they would have the annual Future Farmers of America meetings there, and I'd say 1,000 kids that come through who were, agricultural communities. There were probably 3 or 4 Black kids in the whole organization. They're getting firsthand knowledge of what it is to be farmers. Our kids in the rural areas are in the cities. They don't know what it is to be a farmer. They don't know what it is to raise a pig. And they're listening. I think they're listening to people who also don't know. So I think through sessions like this, and just going to the schools and getting parents to talk to their kids about growing something would help. But that's an uphill battle, because there is no, for the most part, there's no connection with the past. Our kids have no connection with the past, so they don't know. And it took me a while to learn that, history plays a big part in learning. So our kids now are I think they're just going, they're going to school because they have to. And the school is not teaching them substance subjects. So they're going to school and just going through the process of trying to get out of school so they can work somewhere. I really think that, social media can play a big part in learning our students, our youth, but they have to have an interest in learning what it is that they need to learn. So many of them are interested in learning to be, ball players or celebrities, and that's what they see. But they need to see more people farming, or just pulling a carrot out of the ground or whatever, So, but and I think farming itself has not been a problem, but the equipment and owning a farm, that has been a problem, because one, 90% of us don't own the land, or there's so much of a loan on the land that it could be taken away from us at any time. And I think white farmers have a difference. They have a totally different perspective on learning how to, or teaching their kids stuff. especially about farming. So we just have a small percentage of kids who want to learn how to grow stuff, grow their own food. There'll be a process where kids will have to learn. At some point in their life, they're going to have to learn, in the future coming in, you know, and it won't be pretty, but they're going to have to learn.
I have to put my tinfoil kufi on real quick. So we're in the age of cancel culture right now. Cancel culture meaning, hey, I'm in a room of 10 people that like to wear red. I came in this room, I like yellow. Y'all are wrong for wearing red. That red is going to cancel this yellow out. You know, red and yellow are a great complement to one another, but when you have a majority that says, I don't like what you just said, so just what you said doesn't matter, and you apply this to media. Once again, we're not here at B1AG for entertainment. We're here for solutions. You know, when in my modest opinion, our inability to do business amongst one another is very valuable to the people that do sell us the products and services we buy. Meaning because we have these issues, having these conversations, you know, getting this wealth from people who have a direct interest in us being better, is making money for other people. And so it does become dangerous when I look at the trends of how the way me and Big J were talking before we got on here. Some of my job, you know, I go to different rural counties around Kentucky, and right now I can just go on my phone. Google Maps is going to take me where I need to go, literally, metaphorically. Type it in my smartphone. I don't need to think because my phone is smart for me. If my phone went down, I think about all of these little back roads when we're specifically thinking about land and farms, right? All of these little back roads I wouldn't have the first clue to know how to get to if I didn't push it in my phone. I don't know about you. I can't think of last time I saw an actual phone book with the map. You think about the speed of construction and new neighborhood development and road development. I imagine our landscape looks very different from last time we looked at a phone book, but using that same metaphor when it comes to our food system. I share the sentiment that I'm not very happy about what this current trend looks like. Our inability to have a conversation and how dependent we really are on a system that could easily go down. When we talk about media, you think about the importance of a George Washington Carver, a Frederick Douglass writing doing a paper that was disseminated to the people. This way, before there was a radio, before there was a TV, there were whole swaths of communities in the South or whatever region Frederick Douglass went to that knew what was going on. They knew the news that was relevant to their community. It wasn't activism. It wasn't radicalism. And it says, hey, since I see, like you said with the Herald Leader, since I see we're regulated to little colored pages, little quarters of a paper, you know, let me pull my resources together. And this ties to what you're saying about the access to equipment. To pull resources together, there's a concept for that. It's nothing new. It's called cooperative economics. If you want to go ancient times, Susu economics. How do we promote that? And how do, you know, what is a way that we can kind of go black to the future when it comes to media? Just in case it gets to a point where somebody decides, I don't want these black people talking about feeding themselves. I don't want these black people talking about production, because then they might think about actually taking action and competing with us. And so, you know, I don't like to be Chicken Little and think the world's coming to an end. But I imagine over your lifetime, you've seen a slow regression of our ability to control our narratives, our food systems. Could you speak on that a little bit? This trend that you see happening, our inability to control how we're getting our communication. What are the long-term impacts? And even more important, from your experience, what are things we can do about it? In a worst case scenario where our communication is cut off digitally, what can we do? How would you go about creating a media outlet in a time like this?
Well, again, that just goes back to what I said about the schools. They're teaching our kids things that just get them through the school system. They're not teaching them anything of substance. You know, back in the day, we had home economics. We would, you know, we learned how to sew, we learned how to cook, we learned, things that dealt with us. You know, now the trend is to learn what's the new math? And they say new math. Math is like counting 1, 2, 3. Here's math. That's all we need. And at 69, I'm 69 now. I have never used calculus. I have never used algebra. It's simple math. So getting our kids to understand that they need to get their hands dirty is a really hard concept for them to understand, because they don't know. Again, they don't know. And a lot of us who have kids, let's say a lot of parents who are under 30, under 40 years of age, they don't know either. So, but they think they know everything. So it's a matter of people talking to older people, and especially people talking to people who grow food, or just taking their kids out to the farms and letting them see what it is that happens on the farm. When I was 13 years old, I went to, first time I ever left home, I went to a place called Camp Daniel Boone. It was down on the river, and it was maybe about 15 miles away from here. We did camping, we did canoeing, we shot arrows. We learned how to shoot arrows, archery, did a little spelunking. I won't go in the cave now, but we had fun for a week, and we learned about animals, and we did a little bit of farming. So it's either for you or not for you, but still, like I say, on the simplest level, you can grow something that you can eat. You can, if you have just a pot that's, you can buy these pots, and grow something. But these kids have no interest in that, and they don't understand it, and no one's teaching it to them if they're not on the farm. So the city kids are kind of stifled, So I don't know, to get them to understand, or even to have a conversation with them about agriculture and growing foods and where foods come from. You got to start with the parents. You got to get them out there and let them see what it is, because a lot of them don't know either. So I've always had this idea in the back of my head that, and I deliver. My job now is I deliver produce and vegetables to restaurants, schools, stores. This stuff is not just, people don't understand, or they don't even think about, like Kroger. Kroger grows nothing. Everything comes into Kroger on a truck, so people they need to understand, if those trucks stop rolling, you're going to stop eating unless you know how to grow something. But we need to find a way to have people talking about how to make life easy and how to grow. As you say, you are what you eat. And some people are going to be eating dirt. They don't understand what it is, how to do. Might put a little sugar on it, but they're probably going to have to eat some dirt.
Right. We appreciate this, Mr. Cordray. It's funny you bring that up, because over the last few weeks, I don't know if you've heard about the lab-grown meat and synthetic beef proposed by Bill Gates.
Yeah.
This is a thing now. 10 years ago, it would have seemed like a conspiracy theory. 10 years later, this is now what's being considered as a viable protein option.
Yeah.
It's not, it's not, oh, maybe this could happen. This is a real thing. And if we don't have these conversations, like you're saying, we don't start these youth out early experiencing the farms. And like you said, we have, parents. As a parent, I realize, what? My kids right now, and they're still, developmental stages, can't just hop in the car and go to a destination. Dad might not like it, but if dad wants the kid to at least understand the value of this, dad has to come out of dad's comfort zone to do it. And so, once again, we greatly appreciate your presence. It's so many more things that you have to say to people. I don't think we have enough time right now to really to drop all of the gems that you have, but we greatly appreciate this discussion. I hope that the people watching understand that these are the conversations we have to have. Elder, when you think about it, once the elder is gone, because I've experienced this in my family, there are certain questions that nobody else in this world can answer but those who have experienced it. And if you let them transition into another realm, they're not going to be here to answer this question in English. And so that goes into a whole nother level of communication with ancestors, but we're being very specific. And so honor those that have that information while they're here. Most people I know are honored will be glad to answer questions. And so another one of the things when we're going to get out here on B1AG is all of us have an ego check to do. Am I doing everything I can as somebody that cares to get the information? Am I so stuck on what I think I've learned in a book, learned through research, that I've become oblivious to the information that people who've lived through it, that are willing to give it for free? You don't have to go into debt. You don't have to go work, for somebody as a slave when we're able to work with each other and talk with each other.
Yeah, see, that's the thing, man. We don't understand that people, if you ask somebody, like, I would run, when I was running the newspaper, I would run into people who said, oh, your last name is Cordray? I went to school with your mom, or whatever, So I would take that and go back and talk to my mom. I said, Mom, guess who I ran into? And we'd sit down and have a conversation. So it's just a matter of people having conversations. And these kids don't understand that if you start a conversation with an elderly person or an older person, that person will open up and just talk to you. They'll tell you stuff. I still learn stuff. So I'm hoping to at some point grow to be 100, at least 100. So that, because then I have just this much knowledge that I can pass down. And it'll be fun. It'll be fun.
Well, Mr. Don, we definitely appreciate you. You've played a big part in both me and Trevor's life, in our business ventures. You've opened up your doors of your own facilities and always have been there to, just to give us your wisdom and let us know, way we can make out what we're doing easier. You've always been an open resource for us. And for that, we do salute you and we do thank you for that.
I appreciate it. I'm going to give just one word of advice that somebody passed on to me.
Yes, sir.
You can have a library of books. And if you've read all of them, that's fine. But if you don't pass those on or give those books to somebody, they're just sitting there collecting dust. Mine is the same thing. It just collects dust if you don't pass your knowledge on to somebody. So that's what I try to do most important. Sometimes I think I don't have a lot of knowledge, but it's a different perspective. So, you always have. It's always better to have somebody else to come in and look at what you're doing, and then because you're so focused on this, you have somebody over here who just brings it over here. So it's always a different perspective. I like that. I still do that.
Yes, sir. And we do appreciate it. B1AGers. There it is. Y'all see the role of media. We have to take it more seriously, and it is a tool. Media is a tool, and this tool is only as good as the use we make of it. So let's make the best use of this this tool called media. Let's get the word out. Let's bridge generational gaps with our conversations, and also, hey man, let's grow something. It's beyond, like keep saying this over and over again. It's beyond the tipping point. It's beyond the tipping point of where we have to grow our own food. We have to put some seeds in the ground. Our food security is a major issue. Kroger, Publix, any of your favorite grocery stores, they don't grow anything. This food is shipped into them. So if that shipping supply is disrupted, your food supply is going to be heavily disrupted. So we need to go back to the knowledge of our ancestors, and not just our ancestors, it's just common knowledge for human civilization. We got to be able to grow our own food to feed ourselves, and we can't depend on anybody else to do this for us. So on that note, as we end each day, we'd like to let you know that if you really, now I'm talking about if you really, I ain't talking about kind of or a little bit. If you really want to know something, what do they got to do, Farmer Brown? Tell them what they have to do, Farmer Brown.
Really want to know something? Learn how to grow something.
Grow it. All right, y'all. Let's grow on. Let's have us go into this upcoming week with a growth mindset. Let's be prosperous. And B1AG, we out.